Report for you. Things are changing on our procession almost by the hour. So the latest reading is now, we're of course going to have our 10:30 Mass here. We'll be having the 11 o'clock Mass over in our Pearson Street Church. And at the end of that, at 12 o'clock, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be sunny. And we're having a procession out here from there. So by all means, join us at 12 o'clock at the Pearson Street Church and come out in procession. And you don't need to bring your rain gear. It's going to be gorgeous, okay? And then when we get out here, we'll have just benediction of the Blessed Sacrament and then an ice cream social together right there in our community center. So that's the current plan. Check with me in an hour. We'll have another plan, no doubt. One great thing about Flock Notes is we can blast it out to you, whatever, if there's any changes. But as of right now, that's what it's going to look like. He said, hopefully. And then Father Irvin's first Mass is at 2:30 right here. So just kind of blot out the day and come and join us for his first Mass and reception. That way you can have the ice cream early and then the cake later on. So kind of split them up. It's a pretty special day. It's a very, very great day for us as a parish family. And, of course, we're celebrating today the Feast of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of Christ, which is huge for us as Catholic Christians. It's a good day to ask ourselves, what is my personal relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist? How do I relate to Jesus Christ in the Eucharist? Is it one of awe or wonder? Pope Benedict XVI called us to a Eucharistic amazement. Am I amazed as I'm coming forward? You're kidding me. I'm going to receive Jesus Christ into my body? Do we have that amazement? Or is it one kind of repetition, like, yeah, whatever, here I go, another Holy Communion, kind of rolls off our back like this morning's rain? What's my relationship, my personal relationship with Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist? A very, very important question for us to ask ourselves. Why is that such a big deal? Why is the Eucharist so essential to the life of a Catholic Christian? The short answer is because Jesus didn't ask, he told us. He commanded us. He said, do this in memory of me. Not if it works in your schedule or if it's something you'd like. No, do this, he said, in memory of me. Why? Because in the Mass and in those Eucharistic elements of the bread and wine, Jesus is really and actually present. And he wants us to be with him in a real and even a physical way. He desires us to accompany him, to be with him. And the Eucharist, and indeed all seven sacraments, give us our unique Christian orientation to the world. We approach the world different from those who don't have that faith. The Eucharist teaches us who Jesus is. That Jesus is a God who loves us and who's right there with us and who impacts how we live out our daily life. Notice, immediately after Jesus' death and resurrection, those first Christians gathered for the Eucharist. It's something they did right out of the gate from the very beginning. Remember the two disciples walking on the road to Emmaus? They're very discouraged. They thought Jesus had died and that was it. And Jesus told them about the scriptures. He was walking with them, but they didn't recognize him. But then they sat down and they said they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. That's the early name for the Eucharist, the breaking of the bread. In other words, from the very beginning, the disciples believed that Jesus was made present in the Eucharist in a real and a tangible way, and that they were to celebrate that Eucharist. The belief of the Church over 20 centuries has never wavered on that cornerstone of our faith. It's a faith that is handed on to us every single time that we gather here for the Eucharist. Just like the Christians in the centuries before us, the early Christians asked, why are we doing this? You got to remember, the Gospels are written 70, 80 AD. So Jesus has been up in heaven, 50 years at that point. So they said, why are we doing this? And the Gospels, 70 AD, were written to answer that question. That writers took us backwards to that Last Supper, and they showed Jesus doing the same thing. And then they said, okay, what Jesus did at the Last Supper, you're to do right now, reading that into our present day. Let's look for a second at our first reading. It's from the book of Exodus, so we're talking 1,200 years before the Last Supper. And it shows Moses there. And it talks a lot about blood. There's blood everywhere. About the bulls being killed, about their blood being sprinkled on the altar, which was their symbol for God, and then on the people. The point being that they were now united in a blood covenant. They had become blood brothers with God. And of course, the bulls were regarded as the sacrifice that they were offering up to God. Now fast forward to our gospel today. St. Mark shows Jesus doing the very same thing. Only this time, it's not a bull that's being sacrificed, it's Jesus. He is the sacrificial victim. And it's his blood that is being shed for us. In the Old Covenant, bulls were offered again and again and again. But on Calvary, extended in this Eucharist today, Christ offers himself once for all, only one time, for the salvation of the entire world. At this and at every Eucharist, we eat the body and we drink the blood of Christ. And he becomes part of our very being, as does all food that we partake of. But this is divine food. This is Jesus Christ. To be a Catholic is to live a personal relationship with Jesus present in the Eucharist. The gift of the Eucharist is Christ's farewell gift of love for us. As he was leaving the world, he could not leave us alone. And so he left us his body and blood as a perpetual continuance of his presence with us. The greatest of all his miracles. Did you ever think of that? Think, wow, I wish I'd been there when Jesus was on the earth and he was walking on water and healing lepers and forgiving sinners and all the incredible things he did. You know what? You and I are alive to see his greatest miracle. The miracle of changing bread and wine into his body and blood. The greatest miracle of all. Once we understand even a little bit that this is Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, what is our response? First of all, I would say it's reverence. To always dress and act in church aware that we are receiving the King, our Lord Jesus Christ, into our very bodies. Secondly, I would say to always be in a state of grace. Never to receive Jesus with a serious sin on our soul. Always go to confession first. Always receive him as much as we can be aware in a state of grace. Thirdly, I would say, this is a big thing for me. I don't know if it is for you or not. The image I have is two trapeze artists, and the one guy swinging, and the other guy catches his hands. Because this is a moment where we're either going to catch God's hands or not. And the moment is when we're in line, coming up to receive Holy Communion. Our disposition at that point is critical. What are we thinking as we come up in line to receive Jesus? Wow, Mrs. Smith got a new hat. Look at that. Or, oh, the whole Jones family is here. Look, the kids are home from college. No, don't miss that trapeze. Don't miss Jesus. It's a time to prepare yourself carefully for receiving Jesus in Holy Communion. When you're in line, Jesus, this is incredible. I'm about to receive you into my body. This is mind-blowing. I love you, Jesus. Help me receive you with faith and devotion. That's a critical time, just those seconds while we're in line waiting to receive our Lord. Use them well. Use them to dispose your mind and body and soul to receive your King. Those are precious seconds, and the more disposed you are, the more you will receive the graces that Jesus wants to give you when you receive his body and blood. And then adoration is another response. This isn't just bread, it's the living Jesus Christ. So of course we adore. We don't adore bread, but of course we adore Jesus Christ. I was thinking our adoration chapel is a direct consequence of what we do here at this altar. Our adoration chapel says, because I believe, I adore. There's a wonderful cycle. I believe that this is Jesus. I receive his body and blood and become even closer to him, so I want to adore. So I go and adore, which brings me back to receiving Jesus in the Eucharist. So this wonderful cycle where we're growing and growing and growing in our love for Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. Altar to adoration, adoration to altar, over and over again as we draw closer and closer to our Lord. The great story, a true story, of Pope John Paul II a few years ago. He was in Baltimore, and like always, he was running way, way late. He always ran late for everything. And he said, I want to visit a tabernacle. I want to pray before a tabernacle. And they go, Your Holiness, we're already late, and you're not scheduled. None of the buildings here have been scanned, so it's safe to go there. No, I want to go. So they stopped in front of St. Mary's Seminary there in Baltimore, and the men went in, the FBI men and his guards, along with earthquake dogs, just to sniff out if anything was there. And an earthquake dog is trained if they're going through the rubble of an earthquake and they see a person, they squat down on the ground and they whine. They kind of whimper and whine. So the dogs are going through the building, and the men, the guards, caught up with this dog, and he was squatting down there in the chapel in front of the tabernacle, and he was whining. He was whining. The dog knew, and so do we. That's Jesus Christ.